One thing I want to jump right into, in 1998, you start King of the Cage.
Correct.
But how was Boss Rutten involved? Because I was under the impression that the first King of the Cage was called Boss Rutten's King of the Cage.
We did. We talked to Boss and said, Boss, can we use your name to vault the first fight?
Wow.
And I paid him $500. He didn't even want to take the money. Boss is another one of those guys.
He's a great
Boss
guy.
is another great guy, another class act. Would have done anything. If I'd asked him to commentate, he would have commentated. I mean, he's just a fantastic person. And again, there's just not that many of them, but you happen to be talking about two of them today. So we used Boss's name on the first show. We called it Boss Rutten's King of the Cage. And then legally, the legal team that was behind me got involved and said, well, you never know if you put something behind somebody's name, if something, is it over at that point if they make a mistake or if they get caught up in something? I said, yeah. So we didn't push forward with Boss Rutten, but Boss Rutten was really the pioneer for King of the Cage. He was the UFC champion at the time. My first fight prior to the King of the Cage was called Empire One. We held it in a tennis court in Corona.
Wow.
I got the athletic commission to approve me putting on the fights. They tried to cancel it the day of. I already had the approval. I already had the doctor. I already had the insurance, had the ambulance there. And Judo Gene LaBelle was the referee.
Wow.
Boss Rutten was there the day after his fight with Randleman. He had both black eyes after his win against Randleman.
I was at that fight.
One of the few guys that ever was able to win from the bottom because he just kept elbowing the shit out of Randleman that time, from the bottom. So, Boss is one of those just super first class act guys.
Was that your first King of the Cage fight?
That was, it was Empire One. It was in a tennis court in Corona.
So I fought on the fourth King of the Cage, Marv Eastman?
But that wasn't called King of the Cage. It was called Empire One.
Okay,
Joe Stevenson fought on that card. He fought Joe Camacho. He was the wrestler with the wrestling shoes on. He triangled Joe Camacho, who's a rock star in his own. Joe Camacho's another
A lot of
guy.
fighters came out of King of the Cage.
Bro, there's a laundry list. I mean, we looked up some of the best fighters in the world. Diego Sanchez, Uriah Faber, TJ Dillashaw, DC, Sean Strickland, Thug Rose, Bobby Green, Rampage Jackson, Joe Stevenson.
Don't miss Tim Silva, Dan Cormier, Sean Strickland, Carlos Condit, Robbie Lawler, Sean Shirk, TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson, Ronda Rousey, Nico Montano, Rose Nakajumas, Don Fry. That's just to mention 16 King of the Cage world champions in the UFC. People get excited, I'm putting my guy into the UFC. I'm not interested in putting guys into the UFC. That's not what I do. What I do is when they're ready and I know they can win in the UFC, that's when it's time for them to go. A lot of guys try to run early and they wash out. And then they expect me to be able to bring them back. I can't go to television and say, hey, I got the best guys that are not good enough to be in the UFC. I say I have the best guys. They just don't have the exposure that the UFC is getting at this present moment. And when they go to the UFC, they win. The Uriah Fabers,
TJ Dillashaw, Rose Namajunas, Rampage.
Yeah, even the first 4 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter, 7 of the winners were King of the Cage. And these people that I mentioned, it's not like they fought for us one time. That group that I mentioned has over 100 fights combined in King of the Cage. So they were a long part of King of the Cage. Between Gladiator and King of the Cage, I believe Quentin fought seven times for us.
I was the first
eight.
I was the first Gladiator Challenge champion.
Yes.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. So you got a strap for that fight, or did you already have it?
Gladiator, I never got champion in King of the Cage because he took me out, sent me to Pride before I could get the belt. But I wanted that King of the Cage belt for a long time.
Our ability to use him, he won the Gladiator Challenge, which is the qualifier for King of the Cage. But what we needed to do is he needed money. Okay, so we were running shows, so we put him on every show we could get him in to try to keep him. Try to keep him with some money.
How many times were you fighting a year for King of the Cage?
He probably fought 8 times in a year.
In 1 year?
Yeah.